Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Firefighters Podcast, where we seek to develop, inspire, and motivate the world of the emergency services operator through a series of wide-ranging conversations. Now, before we go any further, just hit that rate, follow, or subscribe button on whatever platform you're listening to. It's a key performance indicator for us and helps us reach even more people. Now, here's what we've got for you today. Today on the podcast, we're talking about incident command, and I'm speaking with my good friends Andy Bozzo and Will Pigeon. Andy is from Contra Costa County Fire Protection District, fire captain and co-founder of Tablet Command. He is a passionate fire service professional who has done 25 years of fire service experience in CA and Washington State. He has a visionary mind which led him to the conceiving of Tablet Command. He provides many of the conceptual aspects of the foundational of Tablet Command, a leading emergency incident command software company that has been adopted in US and Canada. He's passionate about continuing to improve Tablet Command solutions by using in the field and learning from other users' experiences, whilst of course sharing his own. Prior to working in the fire service industry, Andy was a teacher and attended USC before transferring and completing his BA at Middlebury College in Vermont. And joining him, as I've already said, is Will Pigeon. He stands at the helm of Tablet Command as the CEO and co-founder, steering the company to the forefront of emergency response and incident command management solutions. A native of the East Bay, San Francisco, Will's journey took him from San Diego State University, where he delved into computer science before securing a BS in information systems. He began his fire service career in 1998, taking on roles from a firefighter paramedic to firefighter dispatcher and flight rescue medic, primarily with the San Diego region. In 2005, his path led him to the Contra Costa County Fire Protection District, where he started as a firefighter paramedic before ascending to assistant fire chief in 2018. Will left the fire district at the end of 2020 to work full-time for Tablet Command as its chief technology officer. During his tenure with Contra Costa County, Will has been instrumental in managing the communications division, encompassing the 9/11 Center for Information Technology departments. His vision, entrepreneurial spirit, coupled with his colleague Andy Bozzo's, gave birth to Tablet Command in 2011, which has since revolutionized how public safety professionals across North America respond to manage incidents. So what is Tablet Command? Tablet Command provides the industry-leading mobile CAD, emergency incident response and management solutions to more than 25,000 users and 600 public safety agencies from across the United States and Canada. Tablet Command software solutions enhance safety and operational efficiency for emergency responders on the ground by providing comprehensive real-time information under a single pane of glass. Tablet Command also records operational performance data as a byproduct of the incident management process. The data and insight it can provide has never been done before and has never existed in the public safety sector. So there's a lot to talk about today in terms of incident command and incident response and the management that is supported by systems such as Tablet Command. So without further ado, let's jump in there with Andy and Will, and I will see you on the other side. So Andy, what do most people get wrong when they think about incident command systems?
So I think that they think that incident command is overbearing, that it's going to interrupt their operations to aggressively mitigate the problem, which can be fire blowing out of a second floor window or person's trapped. Or any imaginable emergency. But the most important thing is to get into the incident command system as quickly as you can while letting your people operate. They know what their job is, but you got to frame around them with that information and safety framework, so to speak, so that when that one thing goes wrong, and I had a great captain, now battalion chief from a neighboring department, say, it's all good in a bread and butter house fire right up until somebody goes through the floor and into the basement, and then all bets are off. And so framing around that with a good incident command system with aggressive command, if you will, to support aggressive fire attack or aggressive rescue, whatever it's going to be, is the only way to go. And I think sometimes because it can feel unwieldy because you've got all these different job descriptions, supervisors and whatnot, people can conflate what that actually means, and that, you know, the big joke that we'll say here is, oh, we're going to spend all this time putting on vests that label what our job is rather than going in and dealing with the problem. Or in our case with Tablet Command, oh, you're going to throw an iPad at this fire. That's not going to put the fire out. And that's absolutely not the case. So I think that's kind of what people get wrong.
When people, someone's standing outside with a tablet going, I don't know how to do your job, but my tablet says you're doing it wrong. And you're just like, no, but we can be, can't we, all very romantic about this job. And the Americans use this term aggressive firefighting, and I love it, but then again, I'm a bit of a knuckle-dragging moron, so I like that aspect of the spit and sawdust. But that's not inherently what we're saying. I try and use words such as purposeful and intentional and, marching to the beat of a different drum. Because when we say aggressive, some people, like you say, word association game, they sort of synonym that with careless, reckless, and elements like that. But I had someone on from London Fire Brigade, Will, who was talking about language learning models and algorithms and how you could load all of this into a system. We've not done it yet in the UK, and I know you guys and girls are really so much further ahead than us. And people push back against that because, again, that romanticism that they think, you know what, it's more of a gut feel and I've got my finger on the pulse. And I'm like, yeah, a little bit. But for us, and this is why I think Tablet Command is such a great system for us, is we're really hemorrhaging skills in the UK at the minute now. We're on this 30-year cycle where we've got a lot of people retiring. I remember hearing a statistic recently that said over a 5-year period, 60% of the UK Fire and Rescue Service will turn over, and they'll have less than 5 years of experience. So having that, Will's got all that experiential knowledge and Andy's just the old hand on the pump, he'll be useful. That's not going to work anymore. So when people are thinking about algorithms and thinking about sort of shortcutting that mental process to a logical, tactical plan of how to deploy the available resources, like how do you try and help people come away from that romantic mindset that using a system like this takes away from their sort of aggressive or experiential knowledge? This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Gore-Tex Professional Fabrics. Now, we all know the working environment of a firefighter is filled with challenges. We face serious risks on the job, such as heat exhaustion, burns, physical and mental stress, and we frequently come into contact with high levels of toxic chemicals. Now, I have been wearing Gore-Tex for nearly 2 decades on the front line, working in hostile environments, tackling challenging incidents from firefighting to water incidents and in urban search and rescue environments. Gore-Tex have a well-earned reputation for protecting professionals in the fire and emergency services through their family of highly innovative, waterproof, breathable moisture barriers that exceeds global performance standards and are trusted worldwide. Gore-Tex, going further together.
Yeah, no, good question, Pete. In terms of, we haven't done anything with large language models in terms of trying to figure out tactics or anything like that. But Tablet Command, is more of a tool that augments, whether it be your command, whatever your command style is, or your aggressive firefighting force, or it's a tool basically that supports you. So one of the things that we wanted to do as a company when Andy and I built Tablet Command was we didn't want the application to be distracting at all. We didn't want people, focusing on the application. We wanted them focusing on their job. And the skills thing that you mentioned, I think the American Fire Service is having a very similar experience in terms of retirement and the experience level, and I think that it's important for the fire service to try to pass on those skills as best we can. But Tablet Command really is more of a tool to augment whatever management style you might have, and then in terms of that gut feel that you mentioned, I think that's important to use whatever tools or tactics or strategy or operational guidelines or policies you might have, but you still have to have that gut feel with that experience. And I think it's like you bring all those things together, and really I think that makes you the most efficient.
When we're looking at firefighter accountability, which is something that really stood out to me on the app, because there's something in the UK where we tend to start micromanaging right down to a very low level on incident grounds, Andy. And I see the American model as being much more pushed towards the accountability of the individual firefighter. I wouldn't be so offensive as to say that people run around self-deploying, which is sometimes the interpretation that the UK get. And then when you have an incident or someone falls through the floor, it's hard to take a roll call, or they don't know where everybody is because everybody's bomb burst around it. Just for predominantly the UK audience, could you just help us understand why firefighter accountability is something that is much more encouraged your side of the water, and certainly something that builds into the way the system was put together, I suppose?
Yeah, absolutely. I think my father's and my grandfather's fire ground, I'm the first firefighter in my family. I'm just kind of using that proverbially, but 30 years ago, 50 years ago, the fire ground was a little bit more predictable. And I think today there are numerous factors that are leading to that unpredictability in the fire ground, and things are happening very dynamically and very fast. So it's really important in our case that that firefighter and that engineer are really tied to that captain, and that captain knows where they are and how they're operating. Now, they could be operating on an independent side of the fire ground, but that captain needs to be able to be summoned immediately and know, where are you, what are you doing, who, what, when, where, and why at any point during the fire ground. I think the first 7 minutes are the most dangerous. And having an idea, having that information, knowing what the task assigned is, what you're calling them on the radio, what the objective is, those are really important things that we hammer in any environment. There are some fire departments a little bit more conservative. There are some fire departments, to use your term, a little bit more intentional about incident mitigation. But across the board, from coast to coast, that accountability has become first and foremost very important. And I think a lot of it goes back to, we're able to access and analyze data. And so fire departments are finding themselves under a lot more scrutiny after the fact. I mean, just in our own fire department, Will and I, we suffered a line of duty death, and then our National Institute of Occupational Safety and Health issued a report that had 134 recommendations. So we're under a tremendous magnifying glass or microscope. And so that accountability is first and foremost. And what we're saying is, you can have that accountability and that incident command structure and still move very intentionally across the fire ground.
You know, when we talk about this line of duty death element, I had, what's the guy's name? I've got his book somewhere. I had a gentleman on, and he wrote a book around, something around, I don't want you to die and I'm not going to kill myself trying, or something like that. A lot of it was around seatbelt safety. It was Dr. Burton something, American gentleman, fascinating guy. And he spoke about this element of line of duty deaths. Just go down this rabbit hole for 1 second and humor me. There's a bit of a culturism in America, I feel, and please call BS on me if this is the case. We call it a line of duty death, as though it is a perceived expectation that this might happen. Like, I would consider, if I was in the military, a line of duty death could be expected, because part of my job is people might shoot at me out of malice. But the fire just says, to whom it may concern. And really, the fire wasn't our fault, or whatever incident it is we go to. But it is our responsibility to try and find a safe resolution to it. But ultimately, firefighting is physics and chemistry, is predominantly what it is. We'd love to romanticize it more and say that it's a whole bunch more stuff, and it is, and I'm not trying to simplify it in an offensive way. But why do you think it's perceived expectation? We sort of glorify these line of duty deaths, and I'm not for 1 second speaking ill of people that have given their lives in the line of service, but I worry that it's too accepted that we are fast and loose and we haven't had a good understanding of our hazards. I don't think it should be such an expectation that firefighters should think that they might lose their life in the job. It's a potential, but it should be so minute. It should be just as likely as me dying on a construction site or me dying in a factory. It shouldn't be something that is, oh yeah, it happens regular. And we're like, it shouldn't. I mean, help me understand maybe the mindset behind that, Will, and I apologize, this is a random rabbit hole that perhaps we didn't anticipate talking about.
I was at a conference just a few days ago, and I was talking to a chief from the East Coast, and he was sharing with me that they had, I believe, 2 line of duty deaths, within the last year or two, and he said he used the term preventable or non-preventable line of duty death, and I agree with you. I think that sometimes we do, have the term line of duty death, and it could be portrayed as potentially accepted as part of the job. But I think there's some that are not preventable. Like, we have a neighboring department here in the Northern California where a fire engine was responding to a fire, and they were opening a gate behind someone's house, and the homeowner came out and shot the captain and killed him.
Jesus Christ.
There's sometimes, or things just spontaneously explode when it's, totally unexpected. I really, I think that the ones that are preventable, whether being too loose, as you use the term, Pete, or, not having a good structure of command or training, I think those are the ones that I think we, could potentially do a better job. And I think that's what we're always trying to do with these reports and these reviews, and departments constantly looking at each other and themselves to try to make things, improved. But no, I see what you're saying. But sometimes it's just, we're in a dangerous job, and sometimes it's just things just happen.
Might I chime in on that as well? One of our risk management model is 3 parts. It's we will risk a lot to save a savable life. The savable life part sometimes is omitted or glossed over. So that's our first. So if we know that we have entrapment from a fire, as much as it wasn't our fault, we're going to push very hard and very intentionally to try and get that person out of there.
We call it the firefighter max in the UK, a lot to save savable life. We will take some risk to save savable property, and we'll take not little to no risk, but we'll take considerably less risk to save environment and other unsavable property.
Absolutely. Well, that's our very exact same wording almost that is in our department. But culturally, when you visit station to station, depending on where you are, you'll see banners that hang over the apparatus bay doors where the engines go out or the trucks go out that says, expect fire, expect victims. So we sometimes see the pendulum swing to where you'll see a house that what we would say is fully involved, where you can't really expect that there's a savable life in there. And folks will make an interior attack, and it's like, hey, we really, we kicked ass on that fire. That was awesome. It's like, for what? That thing's going to get bulldozed tomorrow. So it's kind of on us as incident commanders to be like, sorry guys, nobody's going in there. One of the most compelling stories that I read, and I've heard him speak, was a chief in Worcester, I think in Massachusetts. And it was during a cold storage fire, and I think at the end of the day, 7 lives were lost in a fire because there were reports that there might be homeless people that had broken into an old cold storage facility and were possibly trapped. And it was a maze, a labyrinth of different twists and turns under heat and smoke. And the chief finally barred the door and said, nobody else is going in there. And the guys wanted to kill him. Hey, our guys are in there, blah, blah, blah. But, they'd send 2 in, they'd get lost. Then they'd send 2 more. Then they'd send 2 more. He just said, that's it. We're not, nobody else is going in there. And so there is this push and pull within the American Fire Service around that idea, and then when you go to a line of duty death funeral, the pageantry is beyond.
The
it's
pageantry
like a coronation
is a great way to put
almost.
it.
And so,
so we should honor the fallen 100%. But like you guys have got battalions of vehicles, specifically for that purpose. And everyone goes in their best dress, and we should do, and people deserve it. But I'm like, oh God, I don't know. It just feels. I do admit, to be honest with you, we've swung a little bit too far and the other way of the spectrum, just to point that people like to point fingers, they don't like pointing thumbs. And I go to incidents where someone's already there, and I'm maybe going to take over, and they won't have sent anybody internal yet, and they'll go, well, it's just a hotel, and everybody's out. And I'm like, well, if you never send any firefighters in, they actually become more risk, because they're never getting that operational sharpness, they're never doing the thing. And also the economical value of that building. This might employ 400 people in the local community, and that place may never reopen. The insurance pays out, and it devastates the community. People are out of work for 8 months. So, we have this thing where, nothing's worth a life. No, I'm not saying anything. I'm not saying let's send people in to die. I'm saying let's send people in to save savable property. It is still our job. If that was your business, and you saw us stood outside thinking, are they going in at any point? That building is worth a lot to me. That's my livelihood. That was my great granddad's passed down through generations of whatever it is. So there's 2 sides to this argument, I suppose. You've both got a really, really impressive operational career from many spectrums, both from the wildland firefighting to structural to city and different departments and stuff like this. I know you've now moved out of the primary role, Will, and this is the sole sort of focus for yourself now. Talk to me about the origin story of how you saw the gap in the market for what this is. How did you go? Because they always say it's a very subtle difference between obvious and oblivious. And so when someone creates this, you go, oh, that's obvious. We needed to do that. But very few people actually have the gumption to go out and do it. People just like talking about things rather than actually putting their skin in the game and getting it done. This episode is brought to you in partnership with MSA Safety. Today we have them to thank for the improved firefighter safety through connectivity in their brand new connected firefighter system. At the center of the connected firefighter platform is the MSA M1 SCBA with telemetry. That integrates straight in with the Luna system, which is a wireless all-in-one device creating an independent search and rescue network, providing edge detection, enhanced personal thermal imaging, while simplifying post-scene reporting and data retention. All of this then plugs into the FireGrid system for cloud-based connectivity, real-time information, and data-driven decisions for the incident commander. MSA are truly taking massive strides in the future of improved firefighter safety through connectivity in the brand new MSA Connected Firefighter platform. Now back to the show.
Yeah, the origin story goes really to, in terms of the idea, it goes to Andy. I want to definitely give credit to Andy. Andy had the idea about playing words. He was playing words with friends with somebody kind of halfway across the United States, and he had this epiphany. He's like, why can't this letter that he's dragging out to the board be an assignment? I'm dragging him out to an assignment. It could be an engine company or a truck company with 3 personnel on it with the point score. So it was like, and it was after the iPad came out, I think, which was in 2009. And when we came together to, really kind of work on this and, really kind of build this out, I had a background in technology, but we saw it as like, wow, there's a huge opportunity here to take essentially a traditional tactical worksheet or a magnetic whiteboard or a legal pad that you're tracking things or just tracking things in your head and being able to share that almost like as a Google Doc with everyone in the department and be able to provide things like pilots use all the time that, like checklists. And it's, you shouldn't, that's one thing that I have about the, at least it is in the U.S. Fire Service, and I think it's changing a little bit, is that there's a tendency for chief officers to have this, what would be the word? Confidence, exude this confidence, essentially, that I know everything on this incident that I'm supposed to do.
I would add arrogance.
And, pilots
personally. Yeah.
Arrogance. Okay.
Because the problem is that doesn't enhance situational awareness for the entire operational population, does it? It's like, just because you think you've got all the answers in your head, how do you articulate it? How do you improve that situational awareness so that everyone else is aware of your tactical plan? Otherwise, there's no point in it just being in your head. And like you say, the problem with those old boards is it's not a live, evolving thing, and the incident ground is. It's like you're always trying to hit a moving target with an incident, and we have these recording systems which are always 1, 2, 3 steps behind or 20 minutes behind. Do you know what I mean? They're not relevant. They don't get updated, and the comms is just not there to sustain that situational awareness for other officers coming onto the incident ground.
Yeah, what I was talking about, Pete, was like our application also provides for customized checklists for a department to whatever your operational policies are. And like the aviation industry, pilots use checklists all the time, and they're not ashamed, and they're actually required to use checklists in some regards. And I think that at least in the U.S. Fire Service, there's essentially, people tend to say, I've got this, I know all this. And I think on a residential structure fire, the bread and butter, I think that they do have it because they're doing it all the time. But I think there should be nothing wrong. And I think we should actually start changing the culture that when you do have essentially somebody trapped, or you have a hazmat incident that maybe you haven't run, or here in the United States, an active shooter, you should go through a checklist and kind of use that tool. But to answer your question, when we built the application, we got feedback from some U.S. fire chiefs saying you needed to take this standalone application and tie it into the 911 center so we get the call data automatically. Mm-hmm. So as units are assigned or they swap out because they're closer or they're on a medical and they're going to a structure fire, the units just pop in there. And that's one of the hugest advantages to Tablet Command is there's no going back and saying, hey, a communication center, who's on my second, third alarm? And it's all right there. It's just a simple drag and drop.
Beautiful. Andy, when you first started seeing this come together, and I mean, as an example, earlier this year you presented it at FDIC, as it was probably more of a completed model at that point in time. What are the common pushbacks that you get against it? Because we've obviously heard that quite a few people do immediately fall in love with it, but there will be some pushbacks where people think you perhaps, like the checklist example, I don't know if some people perceive it as condescending or something like that, but what are some of the common pushbacks you get with it?
Honestly, I think it's really well received. I think their own perception of their readiness for technology in their department on a cultural basis is probably the biggest pushback. We'll get to the first pushback comes from, all right, I'm going to introduce technology onto the fireground. Before they see it, they'll say, oh, no way, technology doesn't belong on the fireground. There's still a bit of a technophobic culture that runs around the American Fire Service. We like to say 200 years of tradition unimpeded by progress. So, you can even push, yeah. Well, you can even say that the SCBA, there was probably pushback. That thing's going to slow me down. I can't get underneath the fire, whatever.
SCBA,
that was,
flash hoods.
50,
when we first
60.
saw it in flash hoods and fire hoods, people were like, but that's my gauge, and the top of my ears are burning and all this sort of shit.
Exactly.
What the fuck are you on about? This is just ridiculous.
Yeah.
Yep.
Exactly. So that's the first that's the first layer we have to push through is, okay, we get you, but what are you doing? The follow-up question for us is, what are you doing for incident command? Well, I use whiteboards or I use a pad and paper. So then our counter to that argument is, okay, great. Now, do you have a hard time writing down all those units on a multi-alarm fire? Yeah, it's really hard. It's hard. And it's like, okay, what if somebody did that for you on this tablet? Well, and then the barriers lower pretty quickly. Then the pushback becomes, well, politically it'll never happen, or I don't have the money, or we're not tech forward in this department. And so sometimes there are layers of, I don't want to say excuses, but perceived barriers that we really have to workshop with them to get them to understand that this is an appropriate application for them. It's not going to interrupt their culture or the way that they do business. Whether it's a little bit more organized or a little bit more cowboyish, it's still good. In fact, one of our very first enterprise customers had a reputation of being one of the most cowboy-style fire departments in not only California, but in the United States. And they were very early adopters. And we sort of turned that skepticism to evangelism to our advantage, to use them as a referential customer and send some of those folks out there to sort of evangelize on our behalf. So I would say those are the initial pushbacks. Not necessarily, I think people understand fundamentally that they need to do a tactical worksheet, whether that's on a pencil and paper or a checklist, but they definitely also see their fire department as almost like a friction drag sometimes that we have to workshop them through.
I think there's
Pete, if I
yes, please, Will.
Oh no, I just wanted to comment. I think the biggest pushback is that it's a distraction. That people are focused on the iPad and they're not focused on the scene. And it's actually the opposite. We don't want them to be focused on our application. We want to provide a tool that really helps them. Just to give you an example, if you're calling the communication center to say, hey, who's on my second, third alarm in terms of what units are being assigned to me because you're already on scene and you can't look at the computer screen, that process alone takes 60 seconds on the radio for you being focused versus it's literally just ready in the application to just drag and drop and give them an assignment. Sorry, Pete.
No, absolutely, sir. And every time, like you say, you do a makeup to a second, third alarm, whatever it might be, that's another call and another call and another call. If you're available and you miss it and they're trying to get in contact with you, it's all of those constant delays, especially if that person gets pulled off to another priority call or something like that, depending on the different categories and things like that. Like you say, it's that live system. It is always strange that, and I find the glacial pace of change in the fire department, the fire and rescue service, is just very, and I said this before we sort of started recording, I've worked for a couple of companies in the past where they're really, fast-moving consumer goods companies, they're really at the tip of the sword of change and innovation, and they embrace technology so well, and that marginal gains approach to things. I think if it were worth it financially to have some of those people cross over into our sector is just so invaluable, because the low-hanging fruit of efficiency is just everywhere, isn't it? It's just goddamn everywhere. It seems that we don't have the money to do it well once, but we always seem to have the money to do it twice or three times. And I do think, I'm not saying that tablet command is going to save lots and lots of firefighters or even lots and lots of businesses, but the economical cost of one line of duty death or a loss of a hotel or something like that, it pay for itself in a wanna. Do you know what I mean? It really does. But I also think, like, what's the terms, the length of term that chief fire officers serve for in? Because I also think of this as like a generational shift, a bit like the old analogy that great leaders will plant trees under which they will never sit. Do you know what I mean? It's like, this is a change you could pay for and you see the benefit of it. When you see the benefit immediately, but you might offset the cost over 3, 4, 5 years. And I see this in government, certainly in the UK, where they have a couple of years term, or in America you have 4-year terms and stuff like that. The 6 to 10 year goals, sometimes, and this wouldn't take 10 years to pay off, but people don't tend to do those because they're long-term beneficials. Do you know what I mean? And you almost have to take that initial hit. But it's kind of like people won't see the fruits of that labor until a little while off. But I feel like we're at that point where it's becoming undeniable. We need to start embracing technology far more. We just seem so far back from. There's a great system in the UK. In fact, I think it's in the US as well. Have you seen? Is it the Good Sound system? Have you heard of that one? So I think it's called 999i as well. And I apologize if this is in any conflict with you guys and girls. I don't think it is. But if, for example, a member of the public calls in a fire, and I think this would be a great thing to integrate into Tablet Command if you don't already have a similar system. And they're not a sponsor of ours. We don't work with them. But member of the public calls something in, and we send you a code, and it takes over your phone straight away, and you can start filming it. I know you do already have a system like this in the US, I think. And the incident commander and control can immediately see what's happening at the incident ground. They get the GPS, they get the location. Even if it's like fire survival guidance, someone says, I'm stuck on the 6th floor of wherever, and immediately take over their phone. And you go, right, well, point it at the door, point it out the window, show me where you are. And you can put like 6 or 8 things on this. And imagine you could have 6 camera feeds going live to the incident commander as they're 10, 12, 15 minutes away. And then they arrive on scene. And I just think systems like that, I think the ambulance service in the UK are already using it. But like, this is not new stuff. You know, when you see technology collide, when GPS met phones, and then all of a sudden we've got Google Maps and everything like that. We're at this point now where technology is just colliding, and the atoms of sort of innovation that spark off from that, similar to Tablet Command, there's actually several systems really pouring into the efficiency of this, and we're just so far behind in the fire department, I feel.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, going back to one thing that you said, I just sat at a conference at a table full of fire chiefs from around the United States. 3 of them are very avid Tablet Command users, and one of them made a very bold statement that we've been really trying to, pinpoint and put our finger on and measure it from a quantitative standpoint. But he said the very bold statement, which warmed my heart: you guys at Tablet Command are saving lives you don't even know about. And so to your point about, we're planting trees that we may not be able to sit under, having that accountability, having that shared information platform, having that situational awareness, having those bits of intelligence that are digestible in the moment, those are really, really important as we approach these emergencies that are very dynamic, they're very quickly growing. And so that is something that, we're really trying to quantify, because as we go back to the line of duty death. The bottom line about the line of duty death is not only does it have ramifications from an emotional, physical, psychological standpoint, spiritual standpoint, but the ramifications financially and fiscally for an organization are also equally as detrimental. I kind of did some cocktail napkin math, and it costs between about $3 and $6 million for a firefighter to get killed. It costs more if they get gravely injured for an organization. From an insurance standpoint,
we focus on the fatality,
standpoint.
But if you have a life-changing injury that's going to affect you for the next 40 years, the cost of that is tremendous.
Yeah, it's just, and so, maybe we're a little bit hesitant to like throw actuarials at it amongst the brotherhood, if you will, because we don't want to be interpreted as gross or trying to, minimize someone's life down to, counting beans. But the bottom line is that, when you measure the cost of a slap and dash home that goes up in flames versus the cost of that firefighter's life, they're they're not equal. We're not on equal terms there. So.
The team here at the podcast are extremely excited to announce our brand new partnership with Patrol Store UK. Patrol Store have been serving the UK's police, fire and emergency communities and first responder sector since 2008, providing leading brands such as Hikes, Magnum, 511, Nebo, Op Zulu, Highlander, AKU and many, many more of our favourites. They are now also supplying bespoke uniform, PPE and station workwear to fire services around the UK. So for all our listeners that are part of your USAR, your HEART team, your ISAR team, your armed response teams, your fire investigation, your NALO, your hazmat and all of the training departments that have got your own budgets, be sure to get the absolute best for your team at a realistic price by contacting Aaron and the team at Patrol Store and referencing the Firefighters Podcast. Patrol Store will also be taking part in our listener competition giveaways as well as providing unique discounts to podcast listeners. So for people that are always asking about Hikes boots as an example, that is one unique discount code that is coming to you very soon through Patrol Store. We've also got some incredible bags. I mean, the Op Zulu bags are a game changer. So you know the really Gucci and expensive tactical black bags that everyone's using in CrossFit workouts and taking to the gym and taking to stations? Well, they've basically got that, but it's made better and costs less, because they're not slapping some Gucci expensive brand name on it and it's giving you what you want on a first responder salary. Be sure to keep your eyes in the notes of the episodes for links to unique offers and discount codes. And if you're looking to buy well and buy once, be sure to get in the notes and head over to Patrol Store UK. Now back to the show. How did you get over the integration element with the dispatchers and with, I mean, Will, you had a background as a dispatcher, trying to get new systems like this in to work seamlessly with people like that, and also maybe talk to me about the challenges you faced as operational staff trying to bring in a system that was ultimately your own business. Because people have a real issue with that. Like, we're always walking the fine line with the podcast. But the irony is, individuals such as yourself, well, certainly with the technology background as well, that sort of diverse thinking about the way we go about the sort of complex and ever evolving challenges that, because the job has gotten a lot more complex. 40 years ago when people joined, it was all just structure fires. Now it's hazmat, rope rescue, animal rescue, wildfire. The complexity of the job is ever growing, and we do need to be that jack of all trades, master of none. But talk to me about the challenges that you face, perhaps getting people on board in terms of dispatching systems.
Sure. Well, we started, but Andy and I were both working for Contra Costa, and at the time we had a very friendly fire chief, and we shared with him kind of what we were working towards, and that we built this standalone application, and we wanted them to be kind of the test bed, if you will. And so we created essentially an agreement with the fire district at the time, basically, that they would allow us to integrate into their system, of course, with the support of their IT staff. And we had somebody that I came across, talking to all these different departments throughout the United States in terms of technology. And we really recognized that I found a gem of a person, an absolute diamond of a person, somebody that was working for a municipality in an IT capacity, but was able to code and build that integration and be able to share that data up into our API and into the cloud. And so we did that first with Contra Costa, and then every time that we come across, there's probably, I would say, somewhere around 50 different computer-aided dispatch or 911 systems, in terms of tracking resources. And as we've accomplished all the big ones here in the United States, Motorola, Central Square, Hexagon. And so when we build those, it makes it much easier to do that integration with that next customer. It's much simpler. And then in terms of from a business operations perspective, Andy and I had to be very, very careful, and I'm sure you do as well, like you said with the podcast. But when we were essentially building Tablet Command and working in the fire district, we basically just gave the service to Contra Costa Fire for a long duration for free, really. So there was no conflict of interest, and they were a test bed. And if they had feedback, whether it be the integration, the data, we would hear them and make changes. And then any time that the fire district was making a business decision, I was in the communication center for a short term as a company officer, as a captain, and then as an assistant chief, I had the communication center as well. And any time that the fire district was going to make a business decision, I always excluded myself from that and made it clear that I don't want to be part of that decision. I want them to make that decision on their own. That's kind of how we handled it. I don't know if Andy has anything else to say, but it pretty much in line.
No, that's right on the money. We just had to walk a very fine line because we were introducing something entirely new into the fire service, and this perception of technology. Oh, you guys are going to be millionaires. Oh, what are you going to be a bunch of big shots? So we had to really kind of keep it real.
But also,
in that respect,
what's wrong with that?
Work at busy fire stations.
I think we deserve
nothing.
it.
Yeah.
People say it with the podcast, and let's get a bit of a reality check. We don't provide the same sorts of solutions as Tablet Command by any stretch of the imagination. There's no real competition against what I do. I'm just here flapping my gums, being willing to sound stupid on a weekly basis to bring interesting and knowledgeable people such as yourself to the floor. But there is a real challenge whereby probably the people that should come up with these systems the most are inclined to the least, because they can be very romantic about the way in which they've always done it. They always say firefighters hate two things. They hate it the way it is, and they hate change. And it's just like, it's just a very difficult circle to try and square. I wanted to ask you around, I suppose it echoes over that element of accountability, but certainly for people in the UK, and just to try and translate the sell, not that it should be a sell, but one thing we're big on now through a lot of big debriefs we've done in the past is trying to connect the dots after the fact. So as an example, when we get first on scene, we should do a first impressions message, and then we should send our first message within the first sort of 15 minutes. And that'll be like an informative message. And effectively what that's doing is it's time stamping the fact that we've done some form of an analytical risk assessment or dynamic risk assessment for a legal justification as to why we're going offensive or defensive, how we've married up that balance in our head that would suggest we have carried out some sort of risk assessment that's not yet been documented, and that timestamps it from a legal perspective. But this is a system that when I was looking at the checklists and I was looking at timestamping, the maneuverability and benchmarking against different elements as the incident progresses, just walk me through that like a child, just for people who are unfamiliar with how beneficial this could be from tracking the decision-making processes from a legal perspective, and really getting a very quick, because also we do after we've been there for a little while and we've got a bunch of trucks there, we might start filling out an analytical risk assessment to formally document the risks on the incident ground. And this is a massive piece of paper that they usually give it to an inexperienced firefighter or sometimes a commander that's got nothing else to do. And they'll just wander around the fire ground writing down generic things and putting a number against it. And then that goes on the command and control pump. No one ever looks at it really. No one really goes over the fireground radio and tells everybody about the risks that would enhance that situational awareness. It's more of a paperwork exercise for when the shit hits the proverbial fan, if anybody hurts themselves. But help us understand how this formally, in a live manner, would give that finger on the pulse of the decision-making processes benchmarked against these checklists we've already spoken about.
Yeah, so we have a set of, in our department, which is very similar to, I'll even go out on a limb and say your department. Okay. And, most departments in the United States, we go through a similar progression. We arrive on scene, even en route, if we see a column of smoke en route, we're more or less obligated to report that over the radio. Yeah. And then when we arrive on scene, we'll paint a picture. We're told to paint this picture that gives incoming crews an idea of what the fire's doing.
Do you formalize that with like an acronym? Do you guys and girls have a particular way in which you record that?
Yeah, there's several. So the one that I was brought up on was stop and see, size, type, occupancy, percentage involvement, additional alarms, notable details, directives, and then the C is you have to establish command. So that is the most important thing. Now there's another one called coal was wealth. I don't know how to fill that one in, but it is basically because the first arriving officer is usually a fire captain or a lieutenant in some constructs around the United States, and they are the first on incident commander. The only way that gets suspended is if they know they have savable lives with reliable reports, and they're going to now abandon command, hand it or pass it to the next incoming officer, and get in and get to work. And that could mean being in rescue mode, and they have to declare it over the radio, and that is sort of our legal timestamp document that justifies entering what's called.
So they would abandon
IDLH.
They would abandon having a commander on the outside.
Yep.
Oh wow.
They pass it over the radio, and the commander, the next in fire officer, will assume that command, but they will immediately take action if they think that they can save a savable life. That could mean putting the fire out, or that could mean throwing a ladder to a second or a third story window and grabbing a victim. So they're basically saying, I know I'm supposed to establish command, but in this circumstance, I'm allowed to abandon that or abdicate it, actually is a better word, to the next in arriving officer. And that next in arriving officer should be hearing all of that on the radio and should be immediately assuming that. And then the dispatchers are hovering over us. In some cases, literally, but in most cases, figuratively, they're listening and they're making sure that transfer, and I want to be careful using the word transfer because in those cases where you're in a rescue mode, passing command versus transferring command is, I'm a fire captain, I've maintained accountability, I'm outside, but people are inside going to work. The battalion chief, who's a higher rank than me, shows up and I say, hey chief, this is what I got, this is what everybody's doing, this is where they are, this is what my objectives are, and he'll say, okay, do you want me to, sometimes he'll ask, do you want me to take it or do you want me to keep it? Because he might keep the captain outside in the mentorship role to teach them how to be a battalion chief. In most cases, the captain wants to go work with their crew, and so you'll pass command. I'm sorry, you will transfer command. Yeah. You can transfer command to an equal or higher ordered rank. But we have a series of benchmarks that we have to hit that get repeated over the radio that are also listed in tablet command as well in several different fire departments that are using our product. And they generally go along the lines of something like this. Sizing up, on-scene report, updated conditions report, a 360, meaning you ran around the building or you did your very best to get as many sides of the building as you could to get a full profile of what the fire's doing. And then you're going to make any radio reports that you're entering the IDLH environment immediately dangerous to life and health, meaning you're going into the smoke and flames. You're also establishing a backup team, which we call 2 out, or a RIC, which is a rapid intervention crew. So you can establish a 2 out as sort of a placeholder, as like lifeguards for the firefighters, if you will. But then a RIC is a much more formalized, more heavily equipped set of personnel that are softening the building. They're looking at multiple entry points in case they need to go in and grab you if you get into trouble. And we're saying that in a progression throughout the course of the incident on the radio, on our tactical channels, but also on our command channels. And so a good incident commander is basically following that checklist and hitting that. That used to be in a document form as what we would call a tactical worksheet, but now we're sort of time stamping that with a much easier interface.
And I'm assuming your dispatchers can
gist.
see that information as it evolves as well, and other commanders can look at it whilst they're mobile to the scene, because like we have it with incident command where, especially if we're doing incident command revalidation where someone's getting reassessed to continue with their command role, if you will. And the first brief is always great. The first handover is always great, but it also then becomes Chinese whispers. When I tell Will it might be great and I'll boss the acronym absolutely fantastic, but then the incident evolves a little bit more and he gets complacent or overly familiar with him being there for 10 or 20 minutes. Andy finally arrives and the handover that he gives to Andy is not completely unrecognizable from what I've said, but there might be many crucial elements that have been assumed or missed because Will has been here for quite some time now. And I just think having a more formal approach to writing them down and time stamping them. Like if we're on a medical call, we talk about taking observations every 5 or 10 minutes so we can see the progression or this person's debilitation as they start to descend, the pulses change, whatever it might be. Similarly with an incident ground, you want to kind of get a bit of a timeline of what happened, because if something does go horribly wrong and then Andy quickly pops off to the truck so he can fill out his form and try and remember what it is and what it is he said and what brief did he give and what time was it. And that kind of, you see this in a lot of debriefs from flight decks, don't you, where that distortion of time. How long ago was that, Will? Oh, God, it must have been only 5 or 6 minutes ago. It was 20 minutes ago. That was 20 minutes ago. Just had a look at the CCTV. You got off the truck and you're like, Jesus, really? Do you know what I mean? And that's where I'm like, I'm not saying you're lying, but don't trust your memory. I always say think in ink, but or certainly in this system now, we should evolve that saying, shouldn't we? Because don't trust your memory. You see this in police reports and stuff like that, and they go, how many people were in the room when you got attacked, Pete? And I said, I think it was just me, Will, and Andy. And then you look back at the CCTV and there's 3 other people stood in the corner and all this sort of stuff. I think this type of system allows that much more formal, seamless, and robust transfer of communication with timestamping the actions for that sort of overarching decision control process, which I think we're really lacking in the UK because we're still stuck on this paper format, and then that gets lost. And then after the fact, like I say, whoever the original incident commander is has to fill out an IRS incident recording system, and you're supposed to scan all of this stuff on. It doesn't get done. One of them's got lost and the message format doesn't follow. Because again, how I said it and how you wrote it down in the command booth and then sent it over the radio is sometimes unrecognizable. Because you talk about it in like criminal law, don't you? What is it? It's like first-hand evidence, second and third-hand, and it's just like, well, this is just what Pete said to Will, and then Will said it to Andy to write it down. It's not going to stand up in a court of law. And I think that when we do romanticize the job so much, and we have that, my words, not yours, but slight arrogance about the assumed knowledge that we all hold, that will not stand. That's why everyone gets paid out, because we're not very good at recording stuff. I'm not saying we shouldn't pay out when people get hurt and all this sort of stuff, but we need to be a lot better at this. So I think that sort of system is much more rigid. Help us understand for the people that are brand new into the incident command system, because like I said, people coming through promotion now in the UK, if we're lucky enough to start using this in the UK, this might be their first interaction with it. So let's just take it right down to the basics for an example. And I know we've spoken about lots of these elements in fragmentation already, but take me from, I'm on the truck, we get tipped out at the station, I jump on there and I'm straight on to tablet command. What am I looking at? What is it? How is it aiding me as I am en route to the incident? And then when I arrive there, just give me through some of the elements, if you will.
Yeah, Pete, I'm gonna take you before you even get on the truck. So if you're in the station, one of the things that we have, since we have these real-time integrations with the computer-aided dispatch system, a lot of departments will take, we have an iPad application, which we're talking about, which we're using for incident command, but we also have a phone application that really it's a different UI, and it's on the firefighters. So the firefighters bring their own devices and they load it on their phones, on their iPhones or on their Android phones. They're getting notifications in the station while they're doing chores or while they're sitting in the day room or whatever they're doing. They're getting notifications sometimes 30 to 45 or 60 seconds faster than when the actual station alerting goes off. The reason that they do get that is typically in the United States, the communication centers they'll take the emergency call and they'll verify the address and the call type. And then another dispatcher will pick that incident up, if you will, in their system, and then assign the closest resources and verify the call type and the call notes and who's going to be the closest to this. And then they alert the stations. What we do is, as soon as the address and call type are verified, everyone in the department gets a notification for a structure fire or a hazardous material or a vehicle accident with rescue. And each user can choose what they want to be notified for. So what our customers see is they see their response times lower because firefighters are actually walking to the rig and getting to the rig faster and start putting their turnouts on right away. The other thing that I use...
Will, let me interrupt and interject and then I'm going to want you to keep going. So I had a direct experience with this. I got invited for dinner at a truck and engine house on 4th of July, and we were literally sitting down, and before any lights or bells went off in the station, one of the kids, I say kids, he's a firefighter, so one of the lowest ranking guys, as we're like sitting down for dinner, says, structure fire, Antioch. Those words have so much meaning and impact. We knew exactly how quickly we needed to move. We knew what gear and equipment we needed to put on. And we also knew which direction, just by that, which direction. So what Will said is brilliant. That's why I wanted to interrupt here. We knew by him declaring the town where the structure fire was in, that we could, turn right or left out of the apparatus bay. That situational awareness and intelligence, that little bit of information, got us out of the station before the lights and bells even went off. Will, I apologize for interrupting, but this is
I'm going to apologize as
down
well,
and dirty
because I
application
want to
of what
ask
it
Will
means
to
to a
expand
firefighter.
on one bit just before we carry on. Do I have the ability to track ongoing incidents as well?
Yes.
Love it, because
100%.
when you've got a developing incident in the city, so we used to have the radios on in the appliance bays all the time, but since we moved to a distant system, basically every time we send a radio message, it's like a phone call, so you get charged for it. So we've been told not to leave our radios on. A lot of us still do, because you like to hear the jobs going on, you like to hear it developing, don't you? But it's very strict, and officers coming on stations tend to get you to switch them all off.
It's good for your professional development.
Even if you never go, you just want to hear and see what's going on,
It's
what
good
was
for
the
your
tempo of
professional
it.
development,
But could
right.
I, either on the tablet or my phone, if I'm like, right, there's 4 trucks there at the minute, could I see the checklist they've gone through, the tactical decisions, and then go, right, guys, we might get made up to this in a minute. Let's start looking at the site-specific risk information. Let's start looking at the layout, the water plan. Let's get familiar with what's going on in the city. So would I be able to see that? Because you can sort of see it on some systems, but you have to be sat at a computer, and you can only actually read the narrative log from control, and that's not, with the greatest of respect, doesn't always paint a very good picture. Ever heard the quote that true leaders are readers? Well, we believe this is true. Listeners often ask where we go to keep our finger on the pulse of what's happening in the sector globally. So there are a few key publications which I encourage you to go check out. Now, if you're looking for insights on disaster management, fire protection, and firefighting, for us, we go to Asia Pacific Fire Magazine. And when you're looking for the latest on the Middle East fire protection industry and fire services, it's Gulf Fire Magazine. And our quarterly check-in is with International Firefighter Magazine, reporting to municipal, industrial, and fire training professionals. Now, next up, and widely accepted to be the global voice for passive and active fire protection. This is a good one. It's International Fire Protection Magazine. And finally, and perhaps the most relevant to our predominantly UK audience, I'd strongly suggest subscribing to UK Fire Magazine, reporting to the United Kingdom fire protection industry and fire services. We're really excited to announce that after a long-standing relationship and mutual respect, we've now partnered with MDM Publishing, who bring you all of these essential publications. Because in a world of change, the learners shall inherit the earth, while the learned shall find themselves perfectly suited for a world that no longer exists. Eric Hoffer said that, and I believe he was right. So keep growing, keep learning, and keep yourself in the know and at the cutting edge of what's happening globally by dropping into the notes. And as a gift from the podcast, you can actually subscribe to any of these publications for free using the link in our notes. Now back to the show.
Yeah. So Pete, it's way better than that. So you could be, you could be at the station. You get notified for that structure fire. So you already have situational awareness. And then if I know the radio system thing that you're talking about, we have a similar thing where we get charged essentially, if you will, across systems.
Yeah.
And so the same thing goes true in the United States as well. So one, you get all the CAD comments inside the mobile application as well. So you can be a firefighter looking at that. But as they start managing the incident, you can see who's staffed on that engine, on those pumps, on those trucks. You can see where they're placed, where they actually parked. Nice. You can see the customized maps in terms of where all the hydrants or the plugs are in terms of, throughout or that area. So it really gives you kind of that situational awareness just from like being in the station and being caught up. Lastly, you can also stream the audio, the tactical, the command, and the radio audio into the application. With just a couple second delay. Yeah. So it gives you that great situational awareness.
But that location of appliances as well, for me, like certainly if we're getting somewhere and I'm going to start mobilizing for a turntable ladder or an aero ladder platform, if I don't work at a station like that, I'm not going to have the awareness of the limitations of where I can deploy that resource. But that crew can be looking at that straight away and going, right, what's the incident commander's decision process? There's only 4 or 5 locations we could pitch around this building. He's going to need, or she is going to need to move a few of these resources because I need to be there. And you can already start having that. You can think of your direction of travel, which way I'm coming into the incident. and it saves so much time for something like that. But sorry, well, carry on. So we're getting that live mobilization. I can look back at the incident log. I can hear the narrative. I can see the location of the vehicles and the resources on scene. Then I'm out the doors, and I've got effectively a better, more detailed version of this on the tablet itself.
Exactly. And so when I was a driver, we had Tablet Command, we had TC Mobile, the phone application. And so when I was a driver, we in the United States, well, in our department, I can say, and I think a lot of departments in the United States, and I wonder if this is true also, Pete, for you, but we would have a wall map, a huge map of like the city or the town, basically, and we'd have to figure out on the grid where we're supposed to go. When we had TC Mobile as a driver, I never went to the wall map. I would have the map right here on my phone, and I would be walking to the rig and know where it is and figure out how to get there before I even open the door to get in the rig. So, okay, jumping onto the rig now, the captain has all the same details that they would have with their computer-aided dispatch or their mobile data terminal. They also have the vehicle location. They see how the incident's being managed. One of the frustrations that I had as a company officer is you wake up at 3:30 in the morning to be assigned to a second or a third alarm. The incident's already going. And all you're hearing, as soon as you turn the engine on, you just get the radio traffic at that point. And you're just playing catch up. And you're going into a scene you don't know anything about, really. You're trying to figure it out all out of the map. And all you can see is the vehicle location and all the comments from the dispatch center. That's all you got. So you're basically trying to paint this picture. But now you can jump into the rig. You can see how the incident is being managed, where units are assigned, where they're placed on the map, what checklist items or benchmarks have been completed, plus all the comments.
What I'm right in saying you can pre-assign tasks for oncoming resources as well?
Pre-assign, no. You could.
But it's like frowned upon. Okay. However, there are departments that sort of have like pre-assigned, like if you're the fourth due engine, you're doing this for this incident.
For an example, with our high-rise incidents in the UK, we've started adopting a task-to-resource model in a lot of places. Yeah. So we'll know what the first, second, third, and fourth, and usually fifth appliance on scene, what role they'll be carrying out. And you could theoretically start looking through that list and going, right, we're going to be third on scene. So we're going to be taking these resources and making our way to the bridgehead because this is going to be our role. But when they took away... we went halfway. So we used to have all the communication over the radio, and then we moved to a mobile data terminal where you would mobilize your incident, but you couldn't see where everybody else was. Mm-hmm. So you didn't know which direction they were coming from, and you didn't know if they were already there because they used to book in attendance over the radio, but now they book in attendance on the MDT, on the mobile data terminal, but you don't see where they are. And you also don't see that they've arrived. So you know who's tipped out because you've got it on the sheet and it says, right, these are the trucks going, and you're guessing. You're going, well, I'm assuming that station's going to get there first because they're closer, but maybe they're already out on task. Maybe they're doing community safety. Maybe they're on the other side of the county or the patch doing something else. And then you rock up and you realize you're first in attendance and you've already briefed your crew in the back, assuming you're going to be going to the bridgehead as the 2IC, as the second incident commander or whatever it might be. And I think like something like this would allow for much more preparedness versus that drop shock. There's always going to be some drop shock because what you perceive to be the case and then the actual visuals when you arrive on scene. But you could get a much more formal organization of your resources through a model like this.
Especially with AVL.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, automatic vehicle location.
Sorry, Will, I keep interrupting.
You can see the location of all those things. No, it's fine. So, absolutely. And so to continue, so while you're responding, you get to see how the incident commander is managing and seeing all that stuff. So you get the customized maps while you're responding. One of the limitations that a lot of computer-aided dispatch systems or mobile data terminal companies have in the United States is they provided the comments from the dispatcher and they provided like a basic map and they showed where the hydrant or the appliance is, and that's basically it. What our maps do is a customer can put whatever they want in their maps. So they could have essentially, jurisdictional boundaries. They could put fire cameras, like on the West Coast of the United States, we have a lot of cameras up that assist to locate fire. You can put those up. You could put evacuation zones up, whatever you could put. Anything you could think of, traffic, anything you want, you can put down. So there you have that.
Putting a pre-assigned rendezvous point, an evacuation point. That'd be great to have on a live map, because like you say, especially when incidents are getting quite busy, you don't want everyone just dropping onto the scene and clogging up the access and egress routes for further appliances. You want them to go to an RVP. And equally, if the building collapses or you have an emergency of some form, that situational awareness of where the evacuation point is everyone starts heading in different directions, like herding cats sometimes.
Definitely. Yeah, so we in our application, the incident commander can drop down some points in the application, but we have a partnership with a company, some brothers out in Australia, fire service, FireMapper or Firefront Solutions. They have an amazing mapping product that was designed for the fire service, and we integrate with that in real time. So FireMapper allows multiple users to edit and annotate the map, such as defining evacuation zones, preset points. They can assess structures. They can draw a fire line. Multiple people can do that simultaneously in FireMapper, both online and offline, and then it all comes back into Tablet Command, so everyone's viewing that kind of same data as well. Just to
so
touch
if
on
you
what
were placing cordons in place for evacuation purposes and then marking off buildings that you've already evacuated, or if you've got a cylinder or a vapor cloud from a hazardous materials incident, you could say, right, there's a 200-meter cordon incident command has declared, and that is this. Rendezvous point is 300 100%. Meters north-south in the opposite direction of the wind, and all this sort of stuff. Fellas, this is so much fucking better.
Yes.
And the stuff we found out is so much better.
Or in the great in the United States of America, if you have an active shooter, which I did, about 6 months ago, I had an active shooter that was shooting off rounds, and so I was able to draw a hot zone, a warm zone, a cold zone, staging area, all on the fly.
We're getting a lot more marauding terrorist attacks in the UK. Obviously, we had the 7/7 bombings and even just people with knives and all this sort of stuff. There seems to be a lot more of that going on. Is this something that do you aware of the JESIP principles, the Joint Emergency Services Interoperability Programs in the UK, where fire, ambulance and police all work together? So this is something that's worth noting down, because an integration for things like the Manchester Arena bombings, this would be very, very useful. And again, going back to that RVP analogy, so one of the big outcomes of the Manchester Arena bombings was the lack of shared situational awareness across different services. So the ambulance, fire and police had a very different impression of what was going on, who had and hadn't deployed to the incident. Some thought it was an active shooter or an active marauding terrorist attack. Some thought there was secondary devices on scene, because we had that lack of awareness. And it turned out, unfortunately, and we've had people on the podcast who were in charge during that incident, the fire service didn't get there until like 3 hours after. And we had there was one guy, a watch commander, where his wife was a paramedic and she was on scene and she'd been there for ages. And she's like, "Where are you guys?" He was on duty, and she's ringing him, and he's ringing control, saying, "Ambulance staff are already there." And the controller like, no one's proceeding to the scene yet. And this went on for ages. And I'm not finger pointing. We're all experts and I'm sure I'd have made the same decisions in the same process, because we didn't have this shared situational awareness. So my question, I suppose, is, have you looked at, and now I know the NHS is a massive beast in the UK, and I'm sure medical and police is a harder integration, but as an aspirational goal moving forwards, would this be something they could look to access for that shared situation around cordons and things like that? If you're a regular listener to the podcast, then chances are you are big into your own personal development and the development of firefighters around you. So I wanted to remind you of our mobile app Drill Book. This is a free training and development resources made by firefighters for firefighters. Heading on to Drillbook, you will find incident debriefs, radio messages, knots and lines, quick reference guides, quizzes every single day. We've got useful links to the ERG, to Web Rescue, to JESIP, Euro Rescue, 10-second triage, National Operational Guidance, and not to mention our daily quizzes where you will find questions on extrication, casualty handling, breathing apparatus, fire development, water rescue, rope rescue, you name it. It is the go-to resource if you've got a spare 5 minutes on the firehouse to develop yourself and those around you. Not only that, if you're looking to get into the fire service, we've got advice on there on interview questions, interview answers. You can build your own questioning in there. And again, remember, this is built by firefighters for firefighters, so you can add your own drills in there. You can pick the drills that you find the most favorite. There is literally hundreds of training ideas, hundreds of drills in there. Remember, this app is absolutely free and it grows every single day down to the contributions of our thousands and thousands of users. It's freely available on Android, Apple, and you will find it in the links for this podcast. Remember, it's called personal development. The clue's in the name. You've got to work twice as hard on yourself as you do on the job. So always be growing, always be developing. Now let's get back to the show.
Definitely. We have customers where they'll have, they work very closely with law enforcement. So we'll have a fire department that works for a city and they'll work very closely with law enforcement. And they have actually implemented Tablet Command and they use it for situation awareness, and they'll either be in the same Tablet Command account so they can have all the same data, or they'll create their own account. And so we also have law enforcement customers that are starting to see the power of that situational awareness for like active shooters and those type of things. Mm-hmm. Lastly, Andy, you might have another comment, but we also have some of our state police will actually reach out to the Tablet Command customers, the local cities, and they'll have accounts so that if they're coming to assist them, they can log on and see, especially some of the aviation assets throughout the state, like in California, they'll have an account created for them so they can share that data with that helicopter.
Mm.
Yeah, definitely.
I think one of the growing concerns, and I want to be respectful of time because I know we're on a hard cap, Andy, but you've got a real background in wildland firefighting.
9-15-ish. We're okay.
9-15-ish, okay. You've got a good background in wildland firefighting, and this is something from a National Fire Chiefs Council, a national operational guidance, national resilience perspective in the UK that we're trying to increase our preparedness for and our tactical awareness. We're sending people on a lot of international courses. We're upgrading a lot of our bunker gear, a lot of our PPE to reflect the needs of the incident ground at a wildfire incident. But what I think we're still a long way behind on is the incident command perspective of it, because you really do have to have a much wider, more holistic view when it comes to wildland firefighting, because the speed at which these things can change. I imagine it's much of the same, and I'll probably be asking you to repeat yourself, but looking at this as a solution for wildland firefighting and the resources, because these can be very widespread, complex, quickly changing incidents, can't they? Certainly, and you'll have much more experience than myself and credibility to speak on that, Andy.
Yeah, so I've been, first of all, I'm lucky enough to work for a fire department where we go on 2, 3, sometimes 4, sometimes 5 wildland fires a day. Whoa. And they can be anywhere from a half an acre to 100 acres. Most of them are small and we keep them small, or they're hemmed in by, different land features. But, when you're dealing with regularly, we're 30 plus degrees Celsius. We have a lot of dry grasses and shrubs and a lot of varying terrain, and that lends itself to wildland fire. And so we get a lot of practice with it. And I've also been on very, very large deployments. It was, we would call campaign fires. The most important thing, and the way that this tool is most effective in that context, is the ability to get into divisions very quickly. The way that we determine divisions in a high rise is generally by floor, 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on vertically. Mm-hmm. And then sometimes we'll do some subdivisions or negative floors, whatever nuance that agency has. With wildland fire, we do it alphabetically. And so generally, speaking in war terms, the left flank is generally division alpha. The right flank is generally division X-ray. And the head of the fire, the direction that the fire is progressing, is division Mike. And, so Division A, Division B, Division C, and so on. And so the importance of designating a supervisor for that bit of the fire, that piece, and saying, this is your piece, this is what I'm calling you, this is the radio frequency I'm calling you on, these are the resources that I'm going to send you, and this is your objective. And so we get a lot of practice in basically slicing this pie up, if you will, so that everybody's in charge of a small piece of the pie and they handle their business within that piece of the pie. So another way of saying it's almost like an incident within an incident. And so as the incident commander, you're checking in with these different portions of the incident to see how well they're going. Now, I've been on incidents where every letter of the alphabet was filled, so much so that they had to do double letters. Okay, so now we've gone Alpha through Zulu. Now we need to go Alpha Alpha. Now we need to go Lima Lima. Now we need to go Kilo Kilo. And these are million-acre fires, which are or million-hectare fires in your context. Just huge, giant. So we do the way that our tactical worksheets are set up within the software and the way that you can drop down the tactical worksheet really quickly allows you to get those units dragged into those divisions very quickly. So we talked earlier in the conversation about seeing where you're being assigned or seeing where you're likely going to be assigned, plus automatic vehicle location. It's just speeding up your thought process without overwhelming you with too many inputs and too much technology, because logically you've done this practice so much, but now you're getting a pictograph of what that's going to look like. And and the other thing about having that piece of software in your hand, being able to have an overhead or a satellite view or a topographic map to go, that's a box canyon. That's a really bad place to put that engine. Or, whoa, this fire is heading right into structures. You know what? I'm going to abandon dealing with the grass right now, and I'm going to send these engines direct to defend structures. We'll worry about the vegetation in just a few minutes. So there's multiple ways that this enhances it, but the incident command system, getting back to your original question, the incident command system is imperative when these things are doubling and doubling again and doubling again. You need to be able to draw a box and have the versatility and agility to almost draw a bigger box if you need to, and assign divisions to each one of those portions of that box.
Pete, I have a question for you. In the UK, you'll have, of course, your communication center. Will you ever have agencies or units coming from another communication center, like another dispatch center, that are coming to assist you?
100%. So regional assets that get deployed, and we really, really struggle because not everyone operate. We all should operate as closely as possible to national operational guidance, but you get a lot of service isms based on different budgetary restrictions and just different sort of archaic hand downs of the way things are done. So getting services to work together under that sort of recognized tactical alignment is very difficult for us.
One of the things on the wildland side, on the wildland fire or these mutual or automatic aid incidents that we conquered, which is probably going to blow your mind, I hope, is that you can, of course, see your vehicle locations inside your communication center. But with Tablet Command, you can see the vehicle locations of any Tablet Command customer. So they could be coming from another communication center, and now you're going to be operating on some large, multi-agency incident, and you can see their locations. And we launched that in 2018, and it blew the mind out of a lot of people in California in terms of
when you get our big complex incidents, we have a lot of national resilience assets such as our high volume pumps or our fogging units or our mass decontamination units, depending on the type of incident, and they will be coming from a long way away. And understanding when they arrive will help you understand, like if you had to sustain a water relay with a number of Bowsers or large water relay transfer units, for want of a better description, knowing when you're going to get your high volume pump, where you're going to locate it, and how long you're going to need to sustain a water relay prior to that system attending would be immeasurably useful, because otherwise you just keep bothering your dispatcher for an ETA. And it's always secondhand information, isn't it? I want to be respectful of your time, gents, but I'm also conscious that we're always going to fail in going through all of the benefits of this system. With the time that we have left, is there anything we want to revisit? Is there anything, something perhaps you want to leave the listener with before we look at wrapping it up?
Well, I would just say that we've really worked very, very hard to bring a level of seamless situational awareness to the fire service. And we've started, I think, in a very tough environment. The American Fire Service is, as I said earlier, 200 years of tradition, unimpeded by progress. And we operate relatively independently, almost like city states. You think back to the mid 15th century and in Italy, and the way the Venetians were warring with the Milanese, and it's a little bit like that. We have these like inner city rivalries and interregional rivalries, and so standardization is something we're always we understand intellectually that we should be doing it, but to get on the same page is a big heavy lift. And so this tool, while maybe we didn't start out to implement it for that end, has really kind of started to achieve that end of this interoperability, this common operating picture, and this elevation in situational awareness that, and I really do hang my hat, and it really does warm my heart when I heard that chief say earlier this week that we're saving lives that we don't even know about. Because when we read about accidents and line of duty deaths, it's always about an accident chain. And early in the chain, things start to go wrong, or early in the sequence, things start to go wrong. So if we can interrupt that through better information, quicker arrival times, and then of course, and I'm going to repeat it again, better situational awareness. I can die a satisfied and happy man that we made an impact, hopefully in the global fire service when it's all said and done. We've done it in the crucible of the American fire service, which, can be perceived, I think, as a bunch of cowboys from across the pond. And so it's been a fun journey. It's been a hard journey. I've lost my hair, but it's all good.
From yourself, Will.
Yeah, the UI is very simple. We're firefighters that we're building the application, so we understand we're not engineers trying to solve a problem. We're actually firefighters working with engineers trying to solve a problem. It does everything from early notification, enhanced response, situational awareness, provides you tools to manage your incident easier, timestamps things, provides time indicators on individual units and inside the application, records everything that you do. And then we also have some features and functionality that really can tie into different systems. For example, if you have a drone, I don't know how drones are, if they're becoming prolific, they're in the UK with the UK
Some
fire
of our
service,
larger services
have a
them,
drone,
but a lot of them become regional assets now. But they are fantastic tools to have on the incident ground. Really, really fantastic.
Definitely, it's just how do you take that drone video and make it readily available. Typically, it's a link that people have to share or a password, or you have to come to the incident command pump to show what's going on. So one of the things that we do is you can customize. We have customized buttons that you can define the button to do anything you want. Can go to any link. So basically, any company officers while responding, if the drone is up, they just hit the drone button, and they immediately get a drone feed that pops up inside the application. So, and we just continue to innovate, with customized maps, integrations with like the best in the fire service, like with FireMapper, and we're just continuing trying to make the application better. And it's predominantly, a majority of our personnel are all either in public safety or have been in public safety, so.
Fellas, I absolutely love it. I think it's similar echoes to myself when I was reading this, and just want to tip the hat for a second to Matt, who's put all of this together and has been very forgiving with my very poor life planning and stuff like that. So tip the hat to Matt. But it's exactly what I think of the podcast. It's made by firefighters for firefighters, and that's exactly what I see as Tablet Command. It's not someone from outside of the sector trying to impose their very limited knowledge on this. It's a beautiful hybrid of technology and authentic experiential learning from seeing the challenges that we face in the ever-evolving fire scenes, and really trying to integrate a lot of the technological advances into that. If people want to learn a little bit more about it, if they look underneath this episode, they will see links to the Twitter, the Facebook, the Instagram, the threads, the link to the YouTube, and most importantly, but you can go to the Tablet Command website, tabletcommand.com. We'll put a link just underneath this. You can see the places it's been featured in the news and really start going through all of the Tablet Command features. I think we've got a lot of the hardware has been done. We've got all the MDTs. We've got a lot of the infrastructure to facilitate something like this. But I think this is really the sort of gem in the crown jewels that can really put the sweet spot to actually give firefighters something that's very deployable in their hands on the incident ground. So I'm really excited to be able to share this with them, and I really do thank you for your time, gents.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Pete. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Yeah, really appreciate it, Pete. This has been awesome.
The Firefighters Podcast was created to recognize, acknowledge, inspire, and hopefully even motivate these incredible individuals who have chosen to be part of the first responder community. Our driving purpose is to create a legacy resource for the current and future generations of firefighters and first responders. We get some incredible feedback from listeners and guests, and as the podcast grows, our desire to create longevity and sustainability means that we are asking for the support of our listeners. If you want to support the podcast, if you want to get discounts to our merchandise, hoodies, clothing, coins, patches, tallies, tallies, and also access to all of the incredible documents get shared with us from our podcast guests and sector leaders, then please head over to our Patreon page, and for just £3 a month, you can support the future of the podcast. Please finally hit that follow, subscribe, or rate button on the platform you're listening, and wherever you are in the world, please support your emergency services responders, and thank you for listening.